The year was 2347, and humanity had finally done what so many generations had dreamed of doing. They had reached the stars. After decades of hard work, failed experiments, and countless sacrifices, the scientists of Earth had cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. The jump drive changed everything. Suddenly, the distant lights in the night sky were not just dreams anymore. They were destinations. When Earth's deep space probes detected signals from intelligent life, the world held its breath. Humanity was not alone. Out there, among the countless stars, other beings existed. They had built civilizations, formed governments, and created something called the Galactic Council. This council had ruled known space for over 50,000 years. 12 elder species sat on its ruling body, making decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. Earth's leaders decided to send a diplomatic mission. They chose their representatives carefully. Ambassador Daniel Porter was a patient man with silver hair and calm eyes. He had spent 30 years negotiating difficult treaties and resolving impossible conflicts. Nothing fazed him. Nothing made him lose his temper. That was why they picked him. Beside him stood Commander Lisa Grant of the Earth Defense Force. She was younger and carried herself with military precision. Her job was simple: protect the ambassador and observe everything. Their ship, the Messenger, was the finest vessel Earth had ever built. It carried gifts from every nation on the planet: works of art, samples of music, scientific data, and messages of friendship from billions of people. Humanity wanted to make a good first impression. The journey took 3 weeks. When the Messenger finally dropped out of jump space near Varanthos Prime, the neutral world where the Council held its sessions, Daniel Porter felt his heart skip a beat. The planet was beautiful, covered in swirling clouds of purple and gold. Orbiting it were thousands of ships from dozens of species. Some were massive, kilometers long, bristling with weapons. Others were small and elegant, like silver needles floating in the void. A council escort guided them to the surface. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere, and Daniel got his first look at alien architecture. The council chamber was built from crystalline spires that reached toward the sky like frozen lightning. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small. It worked. Inside the chamber, the representatives of the 12 elder species waited on elevated platforms. They looked down at the 2 humans standing in the center of the vast room. Daniel felt like an insect being examined by giants. The Volanthi were the first to catch his attention. They were insectoid beings with iridescent wings that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. Their compound eyes showed no emotion, but their mandibles clicked constantly, making sounds that the translation device turned into whispers and murmurs. The Korath were massive, their bodies made of what looked like living stone. They stood motionless, like statues, but Daniel could feel their attention pressing down on him like a physical weight. At the center of it all sat High Arbiter Zethval of the Sindari. He was tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed almost translucent. 4 eyes studied the humans with cold intelligence. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried perfectly through the chamber. "You come before us seeking membership in the Galactic Council," Zethval said. It was not a question. "Your species has existed for barely a cosmic heartbeat. You have no meaningful technology, no cultural achievements of note. Your homeworld is a polluted rock at the edge of nowhere." Daniel kept his face calm, even though the words stung. "With respect, High Arbiter, we come offering friendship and cooperation. Earth wishes to learn from the elder species and to contribute what we can to the galactic community." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The sounds were strange, alien, but the meaning was clear. They were being mocked. One of the Volanthi delegates leaned forward, wings buzzing. "Friendship. You offer friendship. Your species still consumes the flesh of other creatures. You wage war among yourselves over invisible lines drawn on your single world. You poison your own air and water, and you think you have something to offer us?" The Korath representative spoke next, his voice like grinding boulders. "We have studied your history. We know what you are. Violence defines you. Genocide fills your past. You are children playing with fire, and you have the audacity to come here expecting to sit at the table of gods." Commander Grant's hands tightened into fists at her sides, but she remained silent. That was not her role here. She was here to watch and remember. High Arbiter, Zethval, raised one slender hand, and the chamber fell silent. "The Council has deliberated on the matter of humanity. Our decision is final." Daniel felt hope die in his chest before the words even came. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Council. Furthermore, your species is restricted to your home system. Any vessel found beyond the soul boundary will be destroyed without warning. There will be no negotiation on this point. The ambassador opened his mouth to protest, but Zethval was not finished. However, the Council recognizes that complete isolation serves no one. You may send tribute ships once per standard year. These ships will carry resources, minerals, and agricultural products as payment for our tolerance of your existence. In return, we will allow you to live. Daniel's carefully maintained calm finally cracked. "Tribute. We came here as equals, not as servants. Earth has done nothing to deserve this treatment." Zethval's four eyes narrowed. All four of them focused on Daniel with an intensity that made him want to step back. "Equals, you believe yourselves to be our equals. Let me be clear, Ambassador. You are not our equals. You are not even close to being our equals. You are an infestation that we have chosen not to exterminate. That is the only reason you still exist." He leaned forward slightly. "Return to your world, little human. Tell your leaders what was said here today. And pray, if your species does such things, that we continue to find you too insignificant to bother eliminating." Guards appeared on either side of the human delegation. They were Korith, massive and silent, and they made it clear that the audience was over. Daniel and Lisa were escorted out of the chamber, through the crystalline corridors, and back to their shuttle. The messenger was scanned, probed, and examined by Council ships. Every system was analyzed. Every piece of technology was recorded. Only when the Council was satisfied that humanity posed no threat were they released. A fleet of warships escorted them to the edge of Council space and watched as they jumped back toward Sol. The journey home was silent for a long time. Daniel sat in his cabin, staring at the stars streaking past the window. Everything he had worked for, everything Earth had hoped for, had turned to Ashdot Commander. Grant finally broke the silence. She stood in the doorway of his cabin, her face hard, but her eyes showing something else. Pain, perhaps? Or anger? "What do we tell them?" she asked. "What do we tell Earth?" Daniel turned to look at her. The patient expression that had defined his entire career was gone. In its place was something harder, something colder, something that Lisa had never seen before. "We tell them everything," he said quietly. "Every word. Every insult. Every threat. And then..." Daniel looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Council sat in their crystal towers, confident in their power, certain of their superiority. They had looked at humanity and seen nothing but weakness. They had made a mistake. "And then we prepare," Daniel said. "We have work to do." The news spread across Earth like fire through dry grass. Every screen, every device, every public display showed the same images and played the same words. The Galactic Council had rejected humanity. Worse than rejected. They had insulted humanity, threatened humanity, confined humanity to a single star system like prisoners in a cage. The reaction was immediate and loud. Some people took to the streets demanding war. They burned effigies of the alien leaders and shouted for revenge. Others counseled acceptance. What choice did Earth have? The Council controlled thousands of worlds. Their fleets numbered in the millions. Their technology was thousands of years more advanced. Fighting them would be suicide. But something unexpected happened in the weeks that followed. The anger did not fade. It transformed into something else, something harder and more dangerous than simple rage. It became determination. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on something. They agreed that this could not stand. They agreed that humanity would not bow. They agreed that change was necessary. The United Earth Coalition was formed within 6 months. Every government contributed what it could. Every military merged its command structure. Every scientist was offered a position in the new research programs. Every factory began retooling for a single purpose. Admiral Catherine Shaw became the face of this new era. She was 42 years old, young for such a high rank, but her mind was sharper than anyone else in the military. She had studied history, tactics, and strategy her entire life. She understood something that many others missed. The Council's greatest weakness was their arrogance. They had looked at humanity and seen nothing because they expected to see nothing. That expectation could be used against them. Catherine stood before the Coalition Assembly and made a speech that would be remembered for centuries. "They think we are children," she said, her voice clear and strong. "They think we do not understand fire. They think we will stay in our cage and be grateful they allow us to exist. They are wrong. We will become the fire they fear. We will forge ourselves in the heat of their contempt, and when the time comes, we will remind them that underestimating humans is the worst mistake anyone can make." The soul boundary became humanity's crucible. Within its limits, away from the eyes of Council patrols, transformation began. Dr. Samuel Wright was a physicist working at a research facility in what used to be called Chicago. He was 53 years old and had spent his entire career studying theoretical problems that most people thought were impossible to solve. The Council had faster-than-light communication. Humanity did not. Within 3 years, Samuel and his team changed that. The breakthrough came at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. Samuel was running yet another simulation, expecting yet another failure, when the numbers suddenly made sense. He stared at his screen for 10 minutes, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then he called his team. By year 10, humanity had quantum-entangled communication networks that made the Council's relay systems look primitive. Messages could travel instantly across any distance. No delay, no interception. Perfect security engineer Maria Castillo led another crucial project. She was 38, brilliant, and utterly ruthless when it came to solving problems. Her team had been given the sensor data from the messenger. When the Council scanned the diplomatic vessel, they thought they were learning everything about human technology. They did not realize that every scan was also a lesson. Maria's team reverse-engineered the scanning technology within 5 years. Then they did something the Council never expected. They found weaknesses in it. By year 15, humanity had stealth systems that made ships invisible to Council sensors. Not just harder to detect, completely invisible. But the ships themselves were the true masterpiece. In hidden shipyards scattered throughout the asteroid belt, a new fleet took shape. The designs were unlike anything humanity had built before. Every line had a purpose. Every system had backups. Every weapon was devastating. The engineers who built them worked in complete secrecy. They lived in the shipyards, ate in the shipyards, and never communicated with the outside world. The flagship was called the Defiance. It was not the largest ship, but it was the most advanced. It could accelerate faster than any Council vessel. It could maneuver in ways that should have been impossible. Its weapons used principles of physics that Council scientists had dismissed as theoretical. The fleet grew year by year. 100 ships, 200, 300. Each one was better than the last. Each one represented thousands of hours of work, countless innovations, and the absolute determination of a species that refused to be caged. And through it all, the tribute ships kept flying once a year. A human vessel would travel to Council space, loaded with minerals and food and raw materials. The crew smiled and bowed. They answered questions politely. They acted exactly like a conquered people should act. The Council patrol ships would scan these tribute vessels and find nothing unusual. The technology looked primitive. The crews seemed broken. Everything appeared exactly as it should. What the Council did not know was that these tribute ships were specially designed to look weak. Their systems were deliberately outdated. Their engines were intentionally slow. They were masks, hiding the true face of humanity behind a performance of submission. 50 years passed. Half a century of silent preparation, half a century of building, planning, and waiting. Admiral Catherine Shaw was 72 years old now. Her hair was white, her face was lined, but her eyes were still sharp. She had spent her entire career preparing for a war that everyone knew was coming but no one could predict. One day, a young officer brought her a report. A council patrol had been spotted near the Sol boundary. They were running routine scans, just as they always did. They found nothing unusual, just as they always did. Catherine looked at the report and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator watching prey wander into a trap. "How many ships do we have now?" she asked. 412, Admiral. All fully operational. All crews trained and ready. Catherine nodded. 50 years ago, the Council had 3,000 warships in their combined fleet. According to intelligence reports, that number had barely changed. Why would it? They had no enemies. No one challenged them. They had grown comfortable and lazy. 400 against 3,000. The numbers seemed impossible. But numbers were not everything. Technology mattered. Training mattered. Determination mattered. And there was one thing the Council had never understood about humans. When they were pushed, when they were cornered, when they were told they could not do something, they did not give up. They pushed back harder. "Continue monitoring," Catherine said, "and make sure the next tribute ship is ready on schedule. We would not want the Council to think anything has changed." The young officer saluted and left. Catherine turned to look out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Council sat in their crystal towers, certain of their power. They had no idea what was coming. The Velenth border colony of Skethra was not a pleasant place. It was a mining operation built on a barren moon, where 10,000 workers spent their lives digging precious metals out of the rock. The air was thin and toxic. The living quarters were cramped and cold. Nobody came to Skethra by choice, but the mines were only part of what happened there. The colony also had a market. The Council did not call it a slave market. They used words like indentured labor agreements and rehabilitation programs. They spoke of contracts and terms and legal frameworks. But everyone knew what it really was. Beings were bought and sold there like cargo. The Turavi were the most common merchandise. They were a gentle species, small and quiet, with soft gray fur and enormous dark eyes. 200 years ago, the Council had decided that the Turavi homeworld had resources worth taking. The Turavi had no army. They had no weapons. They had no way to fight back. So they became property. Generations of Turavi had now grown up knowing nothing but service. They worked in council homes, council factories, and council pleasure houses. Their children were born into bondage. Their elders died in chains. And no one in the galaxy seemed to care. Commander Nathan Cole, of the Earth vessel, silent. Runner had not planned to start a war that day. His mission was simple: reconnaissance. His ship was one of humanity's newest, equipped with the stealth systems that made it invisible to Council sensors. His job was to slip past the border patrols, map their defensive positions, and return home with valuable intelligence. Nathan was 45 years old. A veteran of 20 years in the Earth's Defense Force, he had been chosen for this mission because of his discipline and his ability to follow orders without question. He was not supposed to engage anyone. He was not supposed to reveal his ship's capabilities. He was supposed to observe and report. The silent runner drifted through space like a ghost, its systems running silent, its crew barely breathing. They had been in Council territory for 6 days without incident. Every patrol passed them without a second glance. Every sensor sweep found nothing. Then, Lieutenant Amy Brennan, his first officer, detected something unexpected. "Commander, I have a vessel on long-range sensors. Korath design. It appears to be a cargo transport." Nathan studied the data on his screen. The transport was heading toward the inner colonies, moving at a leisurely pace. "Nothing unusual about that? Can you determine the cargo?" Amy worked her console for a moment. Then she went very still. Nathan saw her face change, saw something dark pass behind her eyes. "Biological cargo, Commander. 47 life signs. Small bodies." "They are." She stopped, swallowed hard, and continued. They are children. Toravi children. The manifest lists them as property. Destination is the Sindari homeworld. Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew what the Sindari pleasure houses were. Everyone in the fleet knew. Intelligence had briefed them years ago. The reports had been clinical and detailed, and they had given Nathan nightmares for weeks. Our orders are clear, Amy said, her voice strained. Observe and report. We cannot engage. Nathan said nothing. He stared at the screen, at the tiny dots that represented 47 children being shipped to a fate worse than death. If we attack that transport, we reveal our capabilities, Amy continued. We reveal that Earth has been building a fleet. We could start a war 50 years ahead of schedule. Millions could die because of our actions today. I know, Nathan said quietly. The Council does not know we are here. We can slip away. We can go home and report what we saw. Command will decide what to do with the information. I know. Amy fell silent. She knew her commander. She could see the struggle on his face. The battle between duty and conscience. Nathan thought about the plans that Admiral Shaw had spent 50 years building. He thought about the fleet waiting back in Seoul, the thousands of people who had dedicated their lives to this single purpose. He thought about the timing, the strategy, the carefully calculated moment when humanity would reveal itself. Then he thought about the children. How fast can we intercept that transport? He asked, double quotes, Commander. Answer the question, Lieutenant. Amy's hands moved across her console. 12 minutes at full speed. But sir, if we do this, there is no going back. Nathan turned to look at her. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. 50 years ago, the Council told us we were insignificant. They told us we were insects. They told us to stay in our cage and be grateful they let us live. He stood up from his chair. We have been preparing for war since that day. We have been building ships and training soldiers and developing weapons. Why? What is the point of all that power if we do not use it to help those who cannot help themselves? Amy did not answer. She could not. If we fly away and leave those children to their fate, what does that make us? What does that make humanity? Nathan shook his head. I did not spend 20 years in this uniform to turn my back on innocent people. He took a deep breath. Intercept course. Full speed. Prepare weapons. Silent Runner came alive. Engines hummed with power. Weapon systems activated. The crew moved to their battle stations with practiced efficiency. 12 minutes later, the Earth vessel decloaked directly in front of the Korath transport. One moment, empty space. The next moment, a ship that should not exist. Bristling with weapons that should not be possible, the Korath crew had exactly 4 seconds to feel confusion before precision strikes disabled their weapons, engines, and communications. No deaths, no unnecessary damage, just a clean surgical takedown that demonstrated exactly how far humanity had come. Nathan's voice came over the communication channel. Calm and clear. This is Commander Nathan Cole of the Earth Defense Force. Release the prisoners now. The Korath captain's response was pure outrage. You cannot be here. You are confined to your system. This is an act of war. The Council will destroy your entire species for this. Nathan smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Yes, this is an act of war. And you should tell the Council something when they come to pick you up. Tell them what? Tell them that humanity remembers. The Toravi children were transferred to the Silent Runner. They were frightened and confused, unable to understand what was happening. But the human crew treated them gently, gave them food and water, spoke to them in soft voices. The Korath crew was left alive. Their ship was disabled, but not destroyed. A message beacon was attached to their hull, broadcasting on all frequencies. Repeating the same words over and over, humanity remembers. Within hours, the Council knew. Within days, their war fleet was mobilizing. And on Earth, Admiral Catherine Shaw received the news in her office. She read the report twice, then set it down on her desk. A younger officer might have been angry. A less experienced commander might have panicked. Catherine did neither. You made the right choice, she said quietly. Admiral. Her aide looked confused. Commander Cole? He made the right choice. War was always coming. At least now it starts with us doing something worth fighting for. She stood and walked to her window. Prepare the fleet. It is time to show the Council what humans can do. The Council War Fleet was the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. 3,000 vessels from 7 different species gathered at the Sol boundary, a combined firepower capable of reducing entire planets to rubble. The Korath contributed their massive dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer long, armored with materials that could withstand almost anything. The Velanthi brought their swarm ships, hundreds of small fighters designed to overwhelm enemies through sheer numbers. The Sindari command vessels coordinated everything, their advanced computers linking the entire fleet into a single, deadly weapon. High Arbiter Zethval watched the assembly from his flagship, the Eternal Judgment. He was old now, his pale skin thin and papery, his 4 eyes clouded with age. But his mind was still sharp, and his hatred for humanity had only grown over the past 50 years. They think they can challenge us, he said to his advisors. A species that was crawling in the mud while we were building empires. Today, we correct the mistake of letting them live. The fleet moved towards Sol like a wall of metal and light. Every ship was ready. Every weapon was armed. Every soldier knew their purpose. On the other side of the boundary, the human fleet waited. 400 ships arranged in a defensive formation around Earth. They were smaller than the Council vessels, less imposing, seemingly outmatched in every way. Admiral Catherine Shaw stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the enemy approach on her tactical display. Around her, officers worked their stations with calm efficiency. No one panicked. No one showed fear. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. Admiral Captain Peter Hayes said from his station, "The Council fleet is hailing us." "High Arbiter, Zethval wishes to speak with you." Catherine nodded. "Put him through." The main screen flickered, and Zethval's face appeared. His 4 eyes studied her with cold contempt. "Admiral Shaw," he said, "you have made a grave error. Your species attacked a Council vessel and stole Council property. This is an act of war, and you will be punished accordingly." "Get to the point," Catherine said. Her voice was flat and unimpressed. Zethval's eyes narrowed. "Surrender now, and we will be merciful. Your species will not be completely exterminated. We will maintain a breeding population for labor purposes. Your leaders will be executed, of course, but the common people may be allowed to live as servants." Catherine laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It was the sound of genuine amusement. "High Arbiter, let me offer a different proposal. Turn your fleet around. Return to your worlds. Never approach Sol space again. Do this, and we will let you live." Silence followed. Then Zethval laughed as well, a wet, rattling sound that came from deep in his throat. "You have 400 ships. We have 3,000. Your arrogance is amusing, human, but it will not save you." Catherine leaned forward in her chair. "Let me tell you a story, High Arbiter. 50 years ago, your ship scanned our diplomatic vessel. You analyzed every system, every piece of technology, every component. You decided we were primitive, barely worth noticing, because you were," Zethval interrupted, "because we wanted you to think we were." Catherine smiled. "That ship was designed to look primitive. Every system was built to appear a century behind what we actually possessed. We gave you exactly what you expected to see, and you never thought to look deeper." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Zethval's face. "These 400 ships behind me," Catherine continued, "each one carries weapons you cannot detect, shields you cannot penetrate, and engines you cannot match. We did not spend 50 years sulking in our cage, High Arbiter. We spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment." "You are bluffing," Zethval said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "There is only one way to find out." Catherine's smile disappeared. "You wanted tribute from humanity? Here it is." She cut the communication channel and turned to her tactical officer. "Target the lead dreadnought. Fire." The Defiance fired a single shot. It was a beam of concentrated energy that utilized principles of physics the Council had dismissed as impossible. The beam crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second. The lead Korath dreadnought, a vessel that had survived 1,000 battles, a ship that its crew believed was invincible, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, a debris. One moment it was there, and the next moment it was not. The silence on the Council communication channels was absolute. 3,000 ships suddenly had no idea what they were facing. All ships, Catherine broadcast to her fleet. Engage. What followed would later be called the Battle of Sol, but that name did not do it justice. It was not a battle. It was a lesson. Human ships flickered in and out of visibility, their stealth systems making them nearly impossible to track. They appeared behind enemy vessels, fired devastating volleys, and vanished before anyone could respond. Council gunners fired at empty space where human ships had been moments before. The Korath dreadnoughts fell one by one. Their thick armor meant nothing against weapons that simply bypassed it. Their powerful guns could not hit targets they could not see. Captain after captain sent desperate messages back to the command ships, begging for orders, for help, for anything. The Valanthe swarm ships fared no better. They were fast, but human ships were faster. They were numerous, but human pilots seemed to know exactly where they would be before they got there. Formation after formation was torn apart by precise fire. The Sindari command vessels tried to coordinate a response, but the human ships targeted them specifically. Communications arrays were destroyed. Computer systems were jammed. The sophisticated network that linked the Council fleet together fell apart within the first hour. Some captains tried to retreat. They turned their ships around and ran for the boundary, hoping to escape back to Council space. They found human ships already waiting behind them. Admiral Shaw directed the battle from the Defiance, her voice calm and steady as she issued orders. She had spent 50 years planning for this day, and it showed. Every maneuver was anticipated. Every tactic was countered. The Council fleet was larger, but it was fighting blind against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. 6 hours after it began, the battle was over. 1,800 Council ships had been destroyed. The rest had fled, scattering in every direction, their crews abandoning any pretense of organization. Earth had lost 32 vessels. Catherine stood on her bridge, looking at the tactical display. The space around Sol was filled with debris, the remains of a fleet that had come to conquer and found itself conquered instead. "Open a channel," she said. "All frequencies. I want everyone in this galaxy to hear this." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Catherine took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Catherine Shaw of the Earth Defense Force. Today, the Galactic Council sent their fleet to enslave humanity. Today, that fleet was broken. The Sol boundary no longer exists. From this moment forward, humanity goes where it chooses, when it chooses. Anyone who objects is welcome to try to stop us." She paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 listening worlds. "To the species who have suffered under Council rule, know this: you are not alone. Humanity remembers what it feels like to be told you are nothing. Humanity remembers what it feels like to be threatened and humiliated. And humanity does not forget." She cut the channel and sat back in her chair. Around her, the bridge crew was silent, still processing what they had just accomplished. Captain Hayes spoke first. "Admiral, what happens now?" Catherine looked at the stars on her screen. 50 years ago, those stars had been forbidden to humanity. Now they were waiting to be explored. She said, "We finish what we started." The aftermath of the Battle of Sol spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. The news traveled through communication networks, passed from ship to ship, whispered in markets, and shouted in streets. The Council, the mighty Galactic Council that had ruled for 50,000 years, had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. Everything changed. The Korath were the first to withdraw. Their fleet had been devastated in the battle, hundreds of their finest ships reduced to nothing by weapons they could not understand. The survivors returned home and refused to leave again. Their leaders announced that the Korath would no longer participate in council affairs. They had seen enough. The Valenthi sued for peace within weeks. Their ambassador, a nervous creature with constantly twitching wings, arrived at Sol with offers of trade and cooperation. The species that had mocked humanity as prey animals now wanted to be friends. Admiral Shah accepted their surrender with cold courtesy, but it was the subject species who changed the most. The Torve had lived under council rule for 200 years. They had been born into slavery, raised for service, taught that resistance was impossible. Then they heard what humanity had done. They heard about Commander Nathan Cole and the children he had saved. They heard about the human fleet that had crushed the Council Armada, and they started to fight back. The Taravi resistance began small, with acts of sabotage and quiet defiance. But it grew. Workers refused to work. Servants refused to serve. On 100 worlds, the gentle species with soft fur and large eyes showed that they were not as helpless as everyone had believed. Other species followed. The Kathrani, who had been conquered 1,000 years ago, began organizing. The Malver, whose homeworld had been strip-mined by council corporations, started attacking supply ships. Everywhere the council had imposed its will. Cracks appeared in its authority. The Sindari tried to hold their empire together. They sent ships to crush rebellions. They broadcast threats and warnings. They promised terrible punishments for any species that defied them. But their ships kept disappearing. Human vessels, still invisible to Sindari sensors, hunted them through the void. Every fleet the Sindari sent out came back smaller than when it left. Some did not come back at all. High Arbiter Zethval did not survive to see the final collapse. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, he died in his chambers. The official reports said natural causes. Others whispered different theories. It did not matter. The old order was ending. Those who had built it were fading away. Ambassador Daniel Porter was 103 years old when he returned to Varanthos Prime. His body was frail. His movements slow, but his mind remained sharp. He had spent 50 years waiting for this moment, and he refused to miss it. The crystal spires of the council chamber still reached toward the sky, but they no longer seemed so intimidating. The platforms where the elder species had looked down on humanity were empty now. In their place, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered on equal footing. The Galactic Forum was being established. It would not be like the Council. There would be no elder species, no subject races, no tribute ships. Every world would have a voice. Every species would have rights. The days of conquest and domination were over. A young Toravi delegate approached Daniel as he stood in the chamber. Looking at the place where he had been humiliated so many years ago, Ambassador Porter, the Toravi, said, her large eyes shining with emotion, "My people asked me to thank you. If humanity had accepted the place the Council assigned to you, if you had stayed within the boundaries they drew, we would still be slaves. Our children would still be sold in markets. Our future would belong to others." Daniel smiled, the expression creasing a face marked by a century of life. "We do not accept places that are drawn for us. We never have. It is not in our nature. Why not?" The Toravi asked. "The Council was powerful. They could have destroyed you. Why did you refuse to submit?" Daniel thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about the speech Admiral Shah had given 50 years ago. He thought about the scientists who had worked in secret laboratories. He thought about the engineers who had built ships in hidden shipyards. He thought about Commander Cole and his decision to save 47 children. "'Cause submission is death," he finally said. "Not death of the body, but death of the spirit." When someone tells you that you are nothing, you have two choices. You can believe them and become nothing, or you can prove them wrong. Humanity chose to prove them wrong. Admiral Catherine Shaw retired after the war. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for a conflict that lasted only 6 hours, and she felt that her work was done. She returned to Earth, to a small farm in Montana, where she spent her remaining years watching the sky and remembering. Visitors came sometimes. Reporters and historians who wanted to ask her about the battle. she always gave them the same answer. "We did not win because we were stronger," she would say. "We won because they underestimated what humans do when they are told they cannot." She lived another 12 years, passing away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 84. The entire galaxy mourned. Ships from 100 worlds came to Sol to honor her memory. Commander Nathan Cole became a hero. Though he never felt comfortable with the title, he returned to active duty after the war, spending his remaining years helping to protect the new trade routes that connected human space to the rest of the galaxy. When people praised him for starting the war that freed the Taravi, he always corrected them. "I did not start a war," he would say. "I saved children. Everything else came from that." He died at 67, still on duty, still serving. His last words, according to his first officer, were, "It was worth it." On Earth, the anniversary of the Council's insult became a holiday. Not a celebration of war, but a reminder. Schools taught the history. Museums displayed the artifacts. The speech that Zethval had given, recorded by the messenger systems, was played every year so that no one would forget what had been said. The memorial at the United Earth. Coalition headquarters was simple, just a wall of black stone with words carved into it. The words had been chosen by Commander Cole before his death, and they captured everything that had happened in a single sentence. They called us insignificant. They told us to bow. They learned. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, in 100 languages, a new phrase became common. It was spoken by the oppressed finding courage. It was whispered by the downtrodden, finding hope. It was shouted by anyone who had ever been told they were not enough. Humanity remembers. The words meant different things to different species. To the Taravi, they meant that someone had cared enough to save their children. To the Kathrani, they meant that even the mightiest empires could fall. To the Malver, they meant that their suffering had not been forgotten. To humans, they meant something simpler. They meant that when the universe told them no, they would answer with yes. When the powerful told them to kneel, they would stand taller. When the arrogant told them they were nothing, it would become everything. The Galactic Forum grew and strengthened over the years that followed. It was not perfect. No government ever is. There were disputes and disagreements, arguments and compromises. But there was also something new, something that had not existed under the Council. There was equality. There was hope. There was the belief that every species mattered, that every voice deserved to be heard, that the days of masters and slaves were gone forever, and at the heart of it all stood humanity, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the species that had looked at impossible odds and refused to accept them, the species that had burned brightest when the darkness seemed complete. The Council had called them insignificant. The Council had tried to cage them. The Council had insulted them and threatened them and dismissed them as nothing, and humanity had set them ablaze.